Minister Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald. Good evening, everybody. I'm back in London. Well, those that listened last night will know I was only just about in control of my emotions, having seen this appalling worst deal in history. At least that's the way that I read it. And I woke up this morning to see that one or two other people felt the same way. The first was Shailesh Vara, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, who, despite the fact that he was a Remainer in the referendum, wrote a resignation letter saying that the deal leaves the UK in a halfway house with no time limit on when we will finally be a sovereign nation. I thought, wow, bang on the money. Shortly thereafter, another one bites the dust as Dominic Raab, the Brexit Secretary, resigns and said, I cannot in good conscience support the terms proposed for our deal with the European Union. Then another Cabinet Minister, Esther McVey, the former Work and Pension Secretary, she resigned, saying with this deal we would not be taking back control, we would be handing over control to the EU, which, by the way, is exactly how my lawyers read that 585-page document. And, you know, that wasn't it, because Suella Braverman, she left her position as Brexit Minister, another resignation. We also had a resignation today from Raymond Christie, who is a Conservative Vice Chairman and Prime Ministerial Trade Envoy to Pakistan, Ranil Jayawardena, MP, and she was a Parliamentary Private Secretary at the Ministry of Justice. She resigned, saying the deal does not deliver a good and fair Brexit. I haven't finished yet. Another one bites the dust. Anne-Marie Trevelyan joined the resignations, and she was a Parliamentary Private Secretary, and she said she could not support the agreement. And that, of course, you know, if we remind ourselves on the back of Boris Johnson and David Davis and many others going. So, pretty dramatic start to the day, all before Mrs May headed to the House of Commons this morning, and here she was.
Mr. Speaker, what we agreed yesterday was not the final deal. It is a draft treaty. It's not. It is a draft treaty that means that we will leave the EU in a smooth and orderly way on the 29th of March 2019.
Well, at least that was funny, I suppose. And Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader, responding.
The government, Mr. Speaker, is in chaos. Their deal risks leaving the country in an indefinite halfway house without a real say.
And then Jacob Rees-Mogg, that incredibly polite backbencher from North East Somerset, who always said he would do his utmost to support the Prime Minister. Later on in the debate, he had this to say.
I think a coup is when you use illegitimate procedures to try and overturn somebody who is in office. This is working through the procedures of the Conservative Party. It is therefore entirely constitutional. Coup is the wrong word.
So his letter has gone in, and as you know, it's 48 letters that Graham Brady, the chairman of the 1922 committee, needs to have to trigger a motion of no confidence procedure. Well, then, bizarrely, after this day of resignations, of parliamentary debate and drama, bizarrely, the Prime Minister called a press conference for 5 o'clock this afternoon. It didn't start till about 1:15. I didn't quite know what it was all about. I wondered was she going to say that 48 letters were in? What was she going to do? But here she was.
Free movement ended. Vast annual payments
Not true.
stopped.
Not true.
The jurisdiction of the ECJ over.
Questionable.
Out of the CAP.
No chance.
Out of the CFP.
Absolutely not.
This is a Brexit that delivers on the priorities of the British people.
Dear, oh dear, oh dear.
In achieving these objectives, I'm also determined to protect the things that are important to us.
I mean, none of it's true. You know, just look at this document. Things like common fisheries policy stay as the status quo. There's no debate about taking back control of our borders, and we're going into a transition period that could be effectively without end. Oh, Monsieur Barnier, he thinks we're tied into the customs union in perpetuity, and there is nothing in that document that shows us a date at which the transition period will end. And actually, we wouldn't be able to do so unless the EU agreed. It's like saying, I'll voluntarily go into prison, but when I leave, I'll have to get the permission of the jailer. It does not make any sense at all. So, in the light of all of this, I'm asking you, is the end of May nigh? And if you think like me, she's a goner, call 0345 6060 973. Maybe you think she's a brave lady, battling away, sticking there like a limpet in the most difficult of circumstances, in which case text to 84850. Or maybe you fancy somebody else at the helm, in which case, of course, tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. Watch us on Facebook. We are live here in London and, of course, down in Westminster too. And I'm going to go to Westminster and speak to LBC's political editor, Theo Usherwood. Theo, help me. What on earth was that press conference about this evening, given she'd said all the same things this morning?
The press conference this evening was, in effect, a rebuttal to Jacob Rees-Mogg stepping out of St Stephen's entrance and saying that he was going to hand in his letter to Sir Graham Brady, the chairman of the 1922 committee, and was urging others to do so, saying that he had no confidence in the Prime Minister. There had been speculation, many of us wondering whether Theresa May would try and seize the initiative, Nigel, by saying there's a leadership challenge coming down the tracks and I'm going to see it off. I'm going to do a John Major and, in effect, trigger a no confidence vote in myself and force their hand, rather than allowing Mr Rees-Mogg and the European Research Group to set the pace of any vote, which is expected, incidentally, on Tuesday. We haven't officially reached that number at 48 yet, so Graham Brady hasn't made any announcement, declared it. But we're now switching. We're switching between two tracks on this story. You've got the MPs threatening, or the threat of a no-confidence vote on the one hand, and then you have the resignations of high-profile cabinet ministers on the other. There are now sources saying that Number 10 are expecting Michael Gove, the Environment Secretary, to resign tonight. No comment officially.
Theo, I heard that he was offered the job of Brexit Secretary in the wake of Raab's resignation, but said he would only take it if the current deal was torn up and we start again.
And there have also been family circumstances which has meant that he hasn't been playing a full part in the psychodrama here in Westminster tonight and throughout the day. And then we understand Penny Mordaunt, the International Development Secretary, is due to meet Theresa May tonight. Now, if Michael Gove, the key one here, as you know, Nigel, is Michael Gove. He's become the shop steward for the cabinet, somebody who can take counsel from the Remainers on the one hand and the Leavers on the other. The steady force, the real brains in that cabinet. And if Michael Gove resigns, then that's really bad news for Number 10.
OK, we're going to watch it very carefully. Thank you very much indeed, Theo. Folks, you have heard a lot today from politicians, those defending the Prime Minister herself, and those attacking the Prime Minister and resigning. Time for the public. Gary in Orpington, is the end of May nigh?
No, definitely not, Nigel. I mean, I'm not a Theresa May fan. In actual fact, I thought she was going to sell us down the river. I changed my complete opinion of her. I think she's done exactly what the British public said that they wanted. And I think that, she's done exactly what everyone voted for.
So to hand over up to 60 billion quid, to keep us tied inside European Union rules, to have taxation without representation, not to take, no prospect any time soon of getting back control of our borders, our fisheries. How on earth, Gary, is that holding faith with the Brexit vote?
But that's not what she said this evening, Nigel.
I know,
and that's
but Gary, isn't that the problem? She says one thing and does another. She is utterly duplicitous in almost everything that she does.
Well, she said this evening that she was answering what the British public wanted. She was going to strengthen the borders. She was not going to put up a border in Northern Ireland. She said that she was going to do everything the British public voted for. And going by her speech this evening, if she is true to that speech, then I'm sorry, she's answered the British public's Brexit. Well, I voted for out of Brexit, and I think she's answered mine completely.
Gary, she said repeatedly, we are leaving the customs union, over and over and over, including in the general election campaign, and now she says we're staying in the customs union. How do you square that circle?
Well, I think she's got a difficult job, Nigel. She's got a difficult job because she's also got to think of the best interest of the country. The reason the majority of people voted for Brexit wasn't really for anything other than the fact that they wanted the borders strengthened, they wanted free movement restricted.
Which it's not going to be at any time in the foreseeable future.
Well, I can only go on her speech this evening.
All right, Gary,
Nigel.
you're taking it. No, OK, fine. You are taking our Prime Minister at her word. I am saying to you that time and again, she stands up and says these things and does the very opposite. Gary, you and I disagree, but it's a polite conversation. I'm off to Kingston-on-Thames to speak to Rick. Rick, is the end of May nigh?
No, well, I think the problem you've got is even if there's 48 letters that I think have already gone through to the 1922 committee.
We don't quite know that yet, but it must be close, yeah.
Well, it must be close, and I think it's inevitable, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think even then, the vote of confidence will be won by Theresa May. I think the parliamentary Tory party will vote for Theresa May because there is absolutely no one who is an alternative. They will never vote for a hard Brexiter because they will never be able to get anything through Parliament.
OK, but what if, Rick, what if this appalling, as I call it, worst deal in history, doesn't pass in the House of Commons? That's going to put her in a very difficult spot, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And I think then you have a choice. Do you have a choice of a no deal or going back to the public or a referendum or a general election? Then there is a choice, right? But well, I don't think...
Yeah, I mean, that's what she was threatening people with today, wasn't it? She was saying, look, it's either this deal or there could be no Brexit at all, was kind of what she was saying to people. So, Rick, you think that even with the 48 letters, she clings on like a limpet?
Well, it's not like a limpet. There's no one else that is going to make those decisions and make that negotiation happen. There is no one.
OK. All right. Well, I think there are one or two people out there who fancy their chances at this. David Davis, Boris Johnson, to name but two, both of whom think they could do a better job of this, and yet they don't ever quite... Rick, come up public and say so. Thank you. Nigel, the good news is that people are now more aware of how the EU works. Well, I think they're certainly aware of the way the European Commission works. I don't like them, but they're quite good at it, really, aren't they? Jenny in Berkshire says, Nigel, why can't you put party politics aside? I had. And join the Tories for the sake of Brexit. What? Join a party that wants me to be signed up to giving away up to 60 billion quid without taking back control of anything, and actually a customs union deal that, unless we get permission from the EU, could be in perpetuity. Jenny, not a cat's chance in hell I'm going to do that. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here at LBC. It's now 6:15, and some Snap opinion polling overnight showing that only 19%, according to YouGov, of the population support the May deal, with 42% opposed, and the rest as yet not made their minds up. Got to tell you, I've been a lot perkier today. All these resignations make me think that the end of May actually is coming. I've been deeply critical, as you know, if you listen to this show, of Boris Johnson and others, criticising everything she's done, but not having the courage to put letters in, not having the courage to say we need a new leader. I do think today that changed, though, despite the fact I think she's duplicitous and weak and awful as Prime Minister, I have to say on a personal level, her stickability is quite something, isn't it? I mean, you have to, in some ways, quite, I think, admire that. Now, at this meaningless press conference that took place at 5:15 this evening, she was asked a question by the Sun's Tom Newton-Dunn about her leadership and whether she can cling on.
Leadership is about taking the right decisions, not the easy ones. As Prime Minister, my job is to bring back a deal that delivers on the vote of the British people, that does that by ending free movement, all the things I raised in my statement, ending free movement, ensuring we're not sending vast annual sums to the EU any longer, ending the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice, but also protects jobs and protects people's livelihoods, protects our security, protects the Union of the United Kingdom. I believe that this is a deal which does deliver that, which is in the national interest. And am I going to see this through? Yes.
Well, I have to say, folks, I think she's a bit delusional. I mean, I did predict that deal would get through Cabinet, and it did. But when we saw, the full details of it overnight, that led to this spate of resignations. And I've said before, I said 3 weeks ago that I thought it was 70-30, she'd get it through the House of Commons. I said last night I thought it had moved and shifted and changed. I have to say now, I don't think she can get this deal through the House of Commons. I don't really think the numbers are there. And with it, her premiership, given these resignations, given this loss of confidence, I think she is on the way out. And I have to say, I really hope she's on the way out. I want us to have a Brexit Prime Minister, somebody who actually believes in Brexit, believes in Britain, is prepared to put forward a bold, courageous plan. And I think the voters will unite around it. That's my view. I think she's a goner, but I do understand many of you disagree with me. Carl is a first-time caller from Hull. Good evening, Carl.
Yeah, good evening, Nigel. You are absolutely right. The end is definitely nigh.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. I think there's certainly some challenges for the Prime Minister. I genuinely believe it's been a troublesome job throughout the Brexit process, but there's been real inconsistency and pivoting on the leadership front, and I think that's what's cost her ultimately. I'm sure that's what's going to happen. And I think the democracy... Listen, the first time I voted, Nigel, I'm 46 years of age.
Yeah.
First time I voted was at the referendum because I believed that my vote would make a difference.
And this is, Carl, there are millions of people, Carl, like you. That was their first ever vote. And I worry, Carl, if it's not delivered, whether you'll ever vote again for anybody.
Well, like yourself and many callers over the last couple of 3 weeks, Nigel, there's been a lot of thought going into the Lancaster House speech. Yeah. Now, if she delivered on that,
no problem.
Then you know what?
Yeah.
There might have been a different tone around the country, a lot more faith in the government, certainly less resignations have gone in, as they clearly have done today. I think 7, I think you mentioned. So we're at crisis point now. So going on to your second part of the question for me, Nigel, is it's now time for genuine leadership, somebody with experience, somebody like David Davis I'd like to see take the reins as an interim measure, and somebody like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who spoke very eloquently this afternoon, somebody like him to take the reins in about 12 months' time and take this country back on a path where it needs to be.
And what about Boris, Carl?
No, I think Boris has missed his trick, Nigel.
Okay.
I think I do. I genuinely do. I think he showed his hand far too early. I think he was looking for support. It didn't happen. He's made 1 or 2 off-the-cuff remarks, which I don't think has helped him over the last sort of 4 or 5 months.
Okay.
And he's sort of gone out, my opinion, he's gone out of the wilderness a little bit. But yet, somebody like Jacob Rees-Mogg, longer term, he's sold the party line, in my opinion. He's sold the party line. He's shown support for his Prime Minister.
Not
he's
today.
Shown support for his party.
Not today.
Well, absolutely. Today, he's got to... Well, today, I think he's got to a point where he's thought, hang on, it's country before party. He's always been a Brexiteer, and he believes in delivering what the people voted for.
Carl, great call. Keep your faith in our democratic process. We are going to get there in the end, I promise you. David is calling from Preston. Good evening, David.
Good evening, Nigel. Much better than this time yesterday.
Yeah, so am I. I'm quite chirpy, actually, because I do think... I
think Theresa May's days are numbered, and I'll tell you the reason why. Shortly after Dominic Raab resigned this morning, I was looking on Laura Coonsberg's Twitter feed, and in that Twitter feed, she said that Dominic Raab had said that the EU has been blackmailing the UK.
Yeah.
That's the Brexit secretary saying that the EU has been blackmailing the UK. What about that?
Well, they're bullies and I call them gangsters, of course, David. So this would be behaviour entirely in keeping, wouldn't it?
Well, yes, and we'd expect you to say that, Nigel, but this is coming from the shortly Brexit secretary saying that.
Yep.
So he's been in the room with them.
Yep. Well, listen, I've spent 20 years with them, David. 20 years with them. And this is the problem with the European Commission, being the government of Europe, is you have power without accountability, and they can do what the hell they like. How long was she last, David?
Maybe a week.
Maybe a week.
And then I think that, like I said about 6 weeks ago on your show, I think David Davis should take over as interim Brexit.
Well, there's certainly some growing support for him. David, thank you. Easy for your lot to whinge about the deal, but you haven't gone through the negotiations and haven't given any clue about how you would sort it out any better, says Kate in East Sheen. 25 years, Kate, I've argued for a simple free trade deal. No membership of political union. Chris in Chadwell Heath says it's just a withdrawal agreement covering the next few years. It isn't a blueprint for our future relationship. It's probably the best deal we could have got, and there's no point sending people back to ask for something better. Well, Chris, let me tell you something. If this is the best we can get, it isn't worth having. It actually, in many ways, makes our sovereignty weaker than it is right now. Because we're going to have taxation without representation. Colin from Derbyshire says, educate me. May says we will no longer be tied by the ECHR. Where is she wrong? The ECHR point, it looks like they will have some joint say. But interestingly, Colin, an arbitration panel is being set up. And it looks like on that arbitration panel, we will for most of the time be in a 3-2 minority. So not much joy there either, I would suggest. I'm going to go to Finchley and speak to Edward. Edward, good evening.
Hello, Nigel. Look, a few months ago, I heard Michael Portillo on the BBC late at night talking about the Brexit negotiations. He said, and for him to say this is quite momentous, I think, he said it was a conspiracy, what was happening with the way the negotiations were going. And what I heard this evening from May's meaningless and Twilight Zone press conference...
Pointless, wasn't it, Edward?
It was totally pointless.
Yeah.
In fact, it was so pointless, the assembled press didn't even know it had finished because we were waiting for the punchline. and no one put their hands up to ask her a question because there was no punchline.
I know.
There was no semicolon. There was nothing. It was totally meaningless.
Dismal.
And for her to have the confidence to come out and do this confirms what I think Portillo said all those months ago. This is a concerted stitch-up by our establishment in Westminster in collusion with Brussels.
So when Mrs Merkel, and I was there, I was the closest MEP to her, when Mrs Merkel said on Tuesday to the European Parliament that Mrs May wants to stay part of Europe, she was kind of right, wasn't she?
Yes, she was, of course, yes.
How angry, Edward, are you about this?
I'm very angry. I've totally lost trust in our political establishment. I mean, I thought the EU were bad, but what I've seen of the way that the BBC have acted, they just interview Remainers, you know, everything that's going on in our political and media establishment is all weighted towards trying to seize the narrative that we must remain, we can't leave, it's so terrible.
Yeah, and yet, Edward, Mrs May keeps telling us that we are leaving. We're taking back control of our laws, our money and our borders. We're leaving the common fisheries policy. I mean, she comes as if they wind her up at the back every morning. Do you think she's a truthful Prime Minister, Edward?
It's like a combination of the Twilight Zone and Carry On Up the Khyber.
Very good. Oh, very, very good. Thank you very much indeed. Nigel, why did no reporter ask her why she let the civil servants negotiate this deal when they're not accountable? Yvonne in Luton. Yvonne, isn't it interesting that both David Davis and Dominic Raab have gone as Brexit secretaries because she gives the negotiations to the civil service, and she paid tribute today to their thousands of hours of work trying to keep us in. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's now 6:30 and well, a quite extraordinary day. 3 cabinet ministers and 4 other senior Conservatives resign their posts. 7 resignations today. Mrs May in the House of Commons, Jacob Rees-Mogg announcing he's put his letter in to the chairman of the 1922 committee. And then, despite all the time she spent at the dispatch box today, she comes back tonight at 5:15 for a press conference and says all the same things all over again. I couldn't quite work it out. Richard says, what a day. I'm in Tenerife on holidays and I've been glued to LBC radio all day. The deal sucks badly. Hats off to May's stickability. Yeah, Richard, that's I don't like her at all. I hate what she's doing. I think she's utterly dishonest, but I do admire this limpet-like ability to stay on the rock despite the fact the circumstances are tough. I just think it's reached an end, and I think, just the sheer number of people today walking away, I do not see how she can survive, and I cannot now see how that vote can command a majority in the House of Commons. So I think today was the day that things did actually change. Nigel, you won't read this because it squashes your point. Yes, I will. I'll read any... Listen, you can ring up on 0345 6060 973 and you can, as long as you're polite and don't swear, you can say what the hell you like to me. That's what we're here for. This is about open, proper, genuine, democratic debate. However, you can't join an organisation, act as a significant member in creating the aims, rules and structure of it, and then claim that the club is blackmailing you. That's just not logical. Ben in Brighton, let me tell you, these people are massively powerful in Brussels. They are used to always getting their way. They're very good at slapping down democratically elected governments and making them toe the line. That is how this place works. I believe, Ben, that what you see with the European Union is an increasingly centralised, authoritarian, militarised, deeply unpleasant, nasty place. I can't wait to leave. That's my view. Let's go to Northumberland and speak to Nicola. Hi, Nicola.
Hello, Nigel. Lovely to talk to you.
Lovely to talk to you. So, is she a goner, Nicola? Come on, cheer me up and say yes.
Please. She was a goner so long ago.
Well, she's still there.
I just can't help but think back to David Cameron going round at the EU states, you know, trying to get changes made.
Yep.
To come back to our country to say, look, I can give you this. They are prepared to give us this. So we won't have to go to a referendum. That didn't happen. And, you know, therefore a referendum was called because the EU state will not negotiate. So why have we wasted 2 years knowing full well that the EU will not negotiate?
I mean, Nicola, what has she achieved? What has she achieved in this nearly 2.5 years that we're coming up
for? Well, she hasn't,
nothing,
Nigel, at all. Because as far as I'm concerned, I'm a staunch Brexiteer. Mm-hmm. She is a Remainer. It was wrong from the word go. She should never, ever have been in charge of leading our negotiations. But the EU will not negotiate. That's the main point.
No. Well, Nicola, I went to meet Barnier.
Or negotiate.
I went to meet Barnier on the 8th of January this year. Not sitting in the coffee bar in Strasbourg, but a formal meeting in his office in Brussels with my lawyer, and the one thing that was absolutely clear to me, Nicola, was he was going to make absolutely as sure as he could that we would stay within the EU's rule book. Yeah. And of course, we'd sold the pass. We'd sold the pass the month before when she left Downing Street at 4:15 in the morning to go and meet this unelected bureaucrat's deadline and agreed to the backstop. And it's been downhill ever since. Nicola, I'm with you. I've got my fingers crossed that she goes, because I think if we get a Brexiteer in number 10 with a positive message, I think the country would unite behind them. And once that happens, I suspect the parliamentary numbers would get a bit easier.
She has got to go, Nigel, and she will go. But I just hope Michael Gove doesn't step into her shoes.
Well, let's wait. I tell you what, we'll speculate on that as the next few days go by. But like you, I think she's going to go. I did pop something in the fridge today. I'm waiting for that moment. Thank you. I am off to Crewe in Cheshire to speak to Rob, who's a first-time caller to this show. Good evening, Rob.
Good evening, Nigel. Pleasure to speak to you.
Pleasure to speak to you. So does she stay or does she go? Is the end nigh?
I mean, this whole business has revolved around the Northern Ireland backstop, and I'm surprised that no one really from either side has actually mentioned the fact that if countries that border the EU on mainland Europe don't have this same issue, why does it have to happen between Northern Ireland and Ireland?
Yeah, or even Italian principalities that exist within Switzerland, etc., etc., etc.
Precisely.
Yeah.
This all revolves around, in my opinion, the fact that I think she's probably going to get a nice little payoff from the European Union. So to hell with what happens.
What?
To the
Rob,
Tory
come
party.
on. What are you saying, Rob? I mean, no, honestly. Come on. She's not in this for money, is she?
Of course she is.
No, come on. Even I'm not that cynical, Rob. I mean, really.
I mean, this all revolves around, in my opinion, the very beginning of the EEC when it was formulated, because there were a lot of politicians who had Marxist or communist leanings that were very, very pro a confederation of Europe.
Oh yes, I mean Spinelli, Spinelli, the Italian, one of the great founders of this project, was an Italian communist.
That's right.
That is true.
Yeah, and I think that's what it all boils down to. It's a rich man's club. The middle class elitists want everything for themselves. They've got greedy and they don't know when to stop. And it's at the expense of the ordinary working man.
Well, do you feel tonight, Rob, as I do, a little bit more optimistic that we might be a bit nearer getting a proper Brexit leader?
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I find it difficult to trust any of them, to be quite honest. I have more faith in someone like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who certainly seems to press all that buttons for myself.
But Rob, I like Jacob a lot, but I'm not sure he's ready to be leader, is he?
I think that the thing is that you don't... as long as you surround yourself with the right people, you can be a good leader. You know what I mean?
But you've got to get through. You've got to get through the process. You've got to get down to a short list of 2 within the Conservative Party, parliamentary party, before it goes to the members. It's difficult. Rob, I thank you. I'm going to run on. Going to go to Forest Gate and speak to Patrick. Patrick, good evening. Is the end of May nigh?
I think it is, Nigel. But I don't think anyone could do a better job than she's managed to do.
Really?
We've got remaining in the EU by the back door, and I'm loving it.
Very good. Very good. But Patrick, I agree with you. I think if I was a Remainer, I'd be cock-a-hoop at what she's done.
What, I used to be one of your biggest fans back a couple of years ago, but about 1 year ago, I feel like I started to wake up and smell the coffee, and realising that we used to be one of the big bullies within the EU, and well, we've given that up, but at the very least, we can stay there and stick with rules and regulations that have benefited my life and benefited the lives of people up and down this country. It's been absolutely brilliant.
What about competitiveness, Patrick? What about us becoming...
What about competitiveness?
Yeah.
We're fabulously competitive. We're at the cutting edge of competitiveness. We have been for decades.
No, we're falling behind terribly. We're falling behind. We're falling behind the Far East. Terribly, Patrick. I mean, one of the things I always wanted from Brexit, and what Barnier was determined to stop, and with this deal he would have succeeded, is to stop us being competitive. And I like competition, Patrick, because I think it gives people more product choice and cheaper prices.
Well, that's fair enough. I'm not going to argue about that, but I'm also not going to say that competitiveness is something that's been deeply brought down by the EU. When we talk about competitiveness, we should be having a nice, productive country, and then we're not productive, and that's not the fault of the EU. That's been a very long-term problem for us.
Maybe too much cheap migrant labour, unskilled, hasn't helped either. Patrick, so basically, you would agree with me that this is a Remainers Brexit?
Oh, absolutely.
All right, great stuff. You're a great sport. Thank you very much indeed for that. James in Putney says, long-time listener, first-time texter and refugee from the BBC. I have written to my MP, Justine Greening, telling her my lifelong Conservative vote has now expired. James, I think, unless something is sorted out here, there are going to be millions of you, and I mean millions of you. Nigel, it's Christmas next month, and all I want for Christmas is to leave the EU. Interesting one here on Twitter. I blame all this on Gove. If he hadn't knifed Boris in the back, we'd have had a Brexit to be proud of, not this mess. Well, Chris, interesting. And yet you heard Theo Usherwood, LBC's political editor, earlier saying that Gove is effectively the shop steward of the cabinet. He's somebody that both Leavers and Remainers talk to. He's not been in London today, and that's not deliberate. He has had some family issues, problems to deal with. He's refused the job of becoming the Brexit secretary on the basis that if he did it, he'd want to put this in the bin and start again. And I wonder, because you're right, Vaz, on Twitter, it was Gove that brought Boris down, that killed those leadership ambitions, and it could be tomorrow, Michael Gove, that gets rid of the Prime Minister. I think he actually has that much power, whether you like him or not. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's now 6:45. Robin says to me by text, he says, maybe she should make herself the Brexit secretary, as she's the only one who believes in what she's doing. Robin, stop it. The civil service are in charge of Brexit. Ollie Robbins is in charge of Brexit. That's why we're not really leaving. Some disagree. I'm told here Mrs May has given us as close to a 52% Brexit as she could achieve. What are you complaining about? Lots and lots and lots. Broken promises. Repeated statements from the Prime Minister that simply are not true. Steve says, Nigel, if she stays, the Tories are finished, done for. Steve, I don't think they have got a clue in Westminster how much a deal like this would damage them at the next election. Not a clue. Al is a first-time caller from Peterborough. Hi, Al.
Good evening, Mr. Farage. How are you?
Welcome. So, does she stay? Does she survive, or is this the end?
I believe that if she goes to Parliament and have the vote in the House of Commons, I think she will be finished.
Yeah.
But if she went direct to the country, because I'll be honest with you, I thought she spoke well tonight. I don't necessarily agree with what she said, but she spoke well. And I think if she went direct to the people and said, this is it, take it or leave it, I think the British people would take it.
But what... OK, Al, but what actually would the question be?
it would be either do you accept this deal or not.
And would that be in the form of a general election or a referendum?
It would be just a simple question. Do you accept this deal? Either yes or no. And then if it's no, then obviously she's finished. But you can't have Al, you can't have a referendum just on the survival of a prime minister, can you? It's got to be. I wouldn't class it as a referendum. I would class it as a straight vote on what the deal she's made, not on a referendum to stay in. I don't think we should stay in because we voted to come out. It would be just a straight vote. Yeah, okay. Because this is what gets my goat. I was having a debate earlier with a former SNP MP who was saying, "Oh, well, it's very simple. The referendum that needs to be had is we accept her deal or we stay in." And I said, "Well, I wouldn't vote. I'd stay at home." I mean, I find that... No, you can't stay in because obviously the vote was that. Well, that's how I feel about it, Al. Al, how do you... what do you think about her deal? I think it's a not very good deal, but given the shenanigans of all the parties, and to be honest, the British political class, I think, have got a lot to answer for. I really do. Be that Labour, Liberal or Tory or the SNP, a lot of them have got a lot to answer for. They should have all got together and got the best Brexit deal we could have got. Well, it would have been nice, actually. Would have been nice, wouldn't it? Rather like the wartime coalition, if this went beyond normal party lines. But hey, I quite agree, because this is the most important thing since the Second World War. Yep, absolutely. Really is. Okay, Al thinks you should consult the people. I can't see that happening. Gary in Leicester says, "My birthday is March the 29th, but I won't be getting the only present I wanted." Well, Gary, hang on, mate. You never know. It's not over yet. I've wanted Brexit for 25 years, and in the last 24 hours, I've totally lost faith. It's not going to happen. I'm ready to give up and vote Green, because I'm fed up with the old parties. Well, I don't know who you are. There is a lot of upset. There is a lot of disenchantment, but let me just sow a little bit of optimism. If we get rid of this Prime Minister and we put somebody in charge who believes in Britain, believes in Brexit, and says, this is what I am going to do, even if there are some bumps in the road, I'm still going to do it. However obstructive Chancellor Merkel, who's now saying tonight we can't renegotiate the deal, however difficult they are, it's nice of her, isn't it? You know, perhaps we should stop paying all this money, I don't know. But however, you know, and someone who says those things and is positive and clear about what the vision for the country is, I think you would find within a week their opinion poll ratings would be extraordinary. They'd suddenly, the Tories would be 10 points plus ahead of the Labour Party. And I think that once you start to get the country with you, then those votes in the House of Commons get easier. And even if the risk of putting a clean Brexit to the House of Commons would be that they stop you and they force a second referendum on you, I now believe it's a risk worth taking, because this deal that was put yesterday simply isn't good enough. It's worse than where we are today, and that's how I feel about it. Paul is a first-time caller from Reading. Paul, surely she's a goner, isn't she?
Hello, Nigel.
Hello.
I think she should be. But you know what? Would it make any difference, to be honest?
Wow.
Because we all know the civil service is running this.
I know.
Whether Corbyn's in, May's in, but listen, when I watched her tonight on that meeting that she had at 5:15, 5:20...
Yeah.
Her face said it all. I'd like to know who's standing by the side of that door looking at her saying, you tell what you meant to be told.
What did you notice, Paul? She read every word.
She did.
What a speech.
She looks like... I saw Margaret Thatcher with more of a worried look on her face when John Major turned her over.
Paul, I do agree with a lot of what you say. You know, a civil servant gave her a written speech and off you go and read that. She stands up and reads it and there you go. There's no real, genuine thought or passion in any of it. I do agree with you, Paul, about the role of the civil service, but isn't the point, Paul, that a strong leader would say to the civil service, your job is to advise. My job is to decide, and a strong leader would do that.
I don't think we're going to get one in any of the parties, or any of them, which is unfortunate, really, because, like I said, years and years we've all been told it doesn't matter who you vote for, they all do the same thing.
Am I sensing, Paul, that you've almost given up with all this?
No, I haven't. No, Nigel, listen, I'm one of your biggest fans, mate.
All right.
I loved it. I loved the way you spoke to Kay Burley today. I loved it.
I wasn't holding back, was I?
You wasn't holding back. I loved it, right? And she didn't know how to handle you, because that's probably the first time she really spoke to you live. But what I'm saying is, you know, the reason the Labour Party, the Liberal Party, the Tory Party, they're getting the power, They've been in power for the last 40 years. They don't make the rules. It comes from Brussels. And I tell you what, there's not enough people that know the truth out there, Nigel.
No, well, Brussels...
And it's a shame you're not out there more, mate.
Well, I've had quite a good go, Paul, and if it goes completely to rats, I'll be back, all right? Listen, thank you for your support, thank you for your comments. The question is, will Larry, the Downing Street cat, resign? I don't think so. The problem is, instead of embracing the opportunities of Brexit, May has treated Brexit as a damage limitation exercise. Rich, I do really rather agree with that. Whoever replaces Mrs May should simply give us free trade, or you don't get a penny, says tough man Ian from Beaconsfield. I'm with you, Ian. John is a first-time caller from Malvern in Worcestershire. Good evening, John.
Hello, Nigel.
So, come on. Cheer me up. Tell me she's a goner.
I mean, I voted out 2 years ago, and I knew that for me it was one of the most important things I ever did.
Yes.
I'm 62. I grew up in West London. I know that a lot of people have various reasons. They give various reasons why they voted out. But, it's a complex issue. And, I would find it very difficult to explain to people why I voted out, apart from getting our own identity back. Mm-hmm. I think the problem is that people have, the English people, they've lost their spirit, And I think that we need to sort of believe in ourselves more, because if we listen to what everybody else says, oh, you can't do this and you can't do that, well then you're not going to do anything.
But John, don't you think with the right leadership we'd be able to start believing in ourselves?
Yeah, I'm basically want her out of the way, right?
Yes.
And my ideal situation would be somebody else from the party gets into the position, and I wouldn't mind initially. I mean, I don't trust any politician, to be quite honest with you. I don't trust I don't trust
You're not
many
alone.
people at all.
Yeah.
But the thing is, is that at the end of the day, you've got to feel your way as you're going along, and I think that if maybe Boris got in, or even Jacob Rees-Mogg, I think Jacob Rees-Mogg's a highly intelligent man. He's got a. I think he comes across.
I'm not sure he'd make the last two, but John, I'm with you. A change of leader, thank you for the call, a change of direction, somebody at the top who believes in this, somebody to provide a bit of hope, a bit of encouragement, a bit of inspiration to the country, and we might find a very different tone around the whole Brexit debate. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show. I'm back on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, and at 10 tonight it's Tom Swarbrick. But up next, it's Ian Dale, who's going to tell me whether he thinks Theresa May can survive.
I think it's highly unlikely now. She's very resilient, and she put on a fantastic performance in the Commons at lunchtime. So you can't write her off, but I can't see a way that she will be here